All right, you maggots, listen up. Let's put this back at 0. You may have noticed this. This video is for somebody that's noticed a certain thing on shortwave radio, and they didn't know why. And I'm going to explain to you why. You know, I listen to AM 1600, and that's the new, sort of the new band. And some of the radios will go up to 1600. So you tune the radio up to 1600. Notice the capacitor is going almost to its fullest extremes. All right, so then you realize that you can go to band B or A or B. Yeah, this is A. We go to B, or band 1, and we go to 2. We go to that, and then 1600 is all the way down here. And you notice the capacitor is almost totally closed. All right, here's the two things that happen. First of all, when you switch from band A or 1 to 2, or which would be B, you have a different set of coils. And you could say, well, that's the reason. Well, that's sort of the reason. All right, here's the actual reason. When you're on A, you have a certain range. Now, a coil, let's show you what a coil looks like. All right, this is an oscillator coil from like an All-American 5 radio. This is actually out of a Radio Shack shortwave regenerative kit. And you see this coil here? This is wave wound, and that's to reduce the amount of capacitance. That makes the Q of the coil really high. So in other words, this coil has a certain amount of capacitance the way it's wound. And it'll resonate like, say, 3 megahertz, way above the AM broadcast band. And then when you use it, you put a capacitor across it, you tune it in, and it pads it down and brings the frequency down into the AM broadcast band. That's how you want a coil to work. But in the RF amp section, you can only get a certain hot spot, and you try to work with that. So in other words, if you have an AM broadcast band and it goes from 550 kilohertz up to 1500 kilohertz, you're really changing the amount of capacitance across the coil a lot. And each coil really has one sweet spot. In other words, you wind it, you would wind this, so naturally it would resonate without a capacitor yet at 3 megacycles. And then when you put a capacitor across it and you dial it in, it'll give you the complete AM broadcast band as an oscillator. But as an RF amp, this coil will, let's just say it's the hottest in the middle of the band. And that's basically what's going on. Your RF amp in your radio has a coil, and when it's got a capacitor across it and you tune from one side, from the bottom of the band to the top of the band, there's a sweet spot basically centered in the middle of the band. So if you're trying to receive sweet 16 at 1600 kilohertz, what happens is you're at the very end of the range of that coil, and that coil really wants more capacitance. It really wants to Q up or peak up in the middle of the AM broadcast band, but you're at the end of the band trying to get 1600. So the Q of the coil is much lower, and you have amplification, and that allows it to work. But when you go to band B, all of a sudden you notice when we're on band B, there's more capacitance, and it's a different coil, and it works much better. So see, you got the radio, and you're at 1600 on one band, and 1600 is also on the next band, but on one band it's going to come in better. That's what I want to explain to you. I had a couple people, I was saying that, I was trying to get 1600, one of the past videos, and someone emailed me and said, go to band 2. See, I like being on, when I'm DXing AM, I want to be on just one band, out of laziness, instead of switching back and forth. But the person was right. But I started thinking of why. Why when you go to band B or band 2, why does the station get stronger? Well, That's what I thought about it for a while. And then if you look at the circuitry, when you go to band B, all that changes is coils and maybe some AGC, depending on how good the radio is. They might have a second resistor that automatically drops the gain of the radio. And I was thinking about it for a while, and then I said, oh, okay, so here's what's going on. Every coil has a sweet spot. And there are charts in the old Radio Shack little handbooks that show you the capacitance and the coil, and you put your ruler across it, and it'll tell you basically a certain amount of microhenries or millihenries, whatever oscillator you're building, the coil and capacitor ratio. If you get it right, you get a lot more. The sinusoidal wave will be much bigger. But if you just need an oscillator, it's no big deal. It's only when you want to, let's say you're building a transmitter, you want the coil and capacitor to be in the sweet spot. So the most amount of signal will go out of your transmitter. There are certain instances where Q is important. See, on the receiving end, over the years, they've gotten away from high Q coils. They went to some ferrit's an animal, ferrite coils, and they get a little more Q for their size than some of the bigger coils that are solenoid wound. Go read up on how coils are wound and the capacitance and the Q factor of the coil. But that's when you really get into it. And I told you, I can look at the schematic of a radio and tell you how good the radio should be. And the other thing is the size of the coils. Like this radio, the coils are smaller than, say, a National. And you'll see people make a remark, well, I got the Hellcrafters and I got the National, and the National is hotter front end. Well, the National, the coils are bigger. They're wave wound. The Hellcrafters, they use a ferrite slug, and it does work. And unless you have the two radios next to each other, you won't know that one radio is better than another. See, a lot of things are subjective. I had people, when I used to hang out at the shortwave store up in Park Ridge, New Jersey, it was called Guilford. Some people would take the best shortwave radio home, and they would hang a 30-foot piece of wire on it, and then they come back and they'd say the thing really don't pick up that much. Well, what are the atmospheric conditions? Is your area quiet as far as static and noise? And what frequencies were you on? See, you have to teach someone the high frequencies work better during the day, and the low frequencies work better at night. So if the person's at night, late at night, they're up around 30 megacycles, up past CB radio, there's not going to be any international broadcasts up there that you're going to get. Maybe on a special atmospheric night you will. But in other words, they're on the wrong frequencies for the time of day or the time of night, whichever way you want to look at it. But there's so many things involved. But I just wanted to explain to you that when you're at the end of the AM broadcast band with any radio, it's not as sensitive as when you're in the middle of the band on the radio. That's why as you're DXing, you'll keep finding a lot of stations on the middle of the band on the radio. Then they're really close together because you're getting more stations. And then as you go up in frequency and way up where I like to be around, those stations are low power and they're community stations. And I sort of like that because of the feel. And then when you're listening to it, the commercials are for local stores, and it's a whole different thing. That's my thing right now. And but you'll notice that when you're in the middle of the band with an older radio, it's hotter. In other words, it gets more stations. And it just seems like there's more stations close to each other there. But that's because as you go up in frequency, the radio isn't as good, especially at the very top of the band. Some handheld pocket radios, they poop out at 1500. So if you got a station that's like 1520, which I believe would be WKBW Buffalo, it won't pick it up. And then some of the radios, when you go all the way down to the bottom, There'd be like a Long Island station. I used to get it on the Sony 2010, but I couldn't get it on and the Super Radio, but I couldn't get it on any other radio. The coil, the Q of the coil, isn't any good on the RF amp when you're down on the bottom of the frequencies and at the top. But if you have a second band and it's shortwave, you go down to the bottom of the band on B, which is the top of the band for A, and you can get the station. It's very confusing, but that's because you got to understand the Q of a coil. And when it comes to an oscillator coil, you can basically use anything, and it oscillates, it puts out a sine wave, fine. But you take those same coils and try to use them in an RF front end, they're gonna poop out at 1500. So I just want to put that concept in it, run it through your head, and if you get into DXing and you're at the top of the band, go to band B if you got a shortwave radio, and you'll say, wow, they're stronger. Well, it's a different set of coils, and it's got more capacitance. See, this would be A. The fins are all the way out, or the vanes, or the plates are all the way out, and the coil will resonate. It will resonate at that frequency, but the Q of the coil, or the coil doesn't get as excited when you have less capacitance. It wants a certain ratio. There's a certain ratio of capacitance to inductance. And as you go up in frequency, your inductors get smaller, and so does your capacitance. But there's a ratio, and you can take a radio and add capacitance on and slowly bring it down in frequency, and it will pick up stations, but it won't pick them up as good. And that's because the coil is resonating, but it's not really excited. It's not, in other words, it's resonating, but it's not real excitement. The sine wave coming out of it isn't as big as if you go in the middle of the band. The other thing I want to real quick is mention is a ceramic filter. They take I guess some type of quartz, and they grind it all up, and they mix it with ceramic, and they bake plates, and then they grind them down, and that ceramic filter will resonate, and you can use it to filter your IF. That's a ceramic filter. Now, a crystal filter like that comes out of a Collins radio, that's actual quartz crystal elements in it. And when that hits resonance, say 455, that thing really gets excited. Those not veins, there'd be plates inside that crystal filter. They're actually vibrating above your hearing. You can't hear it. It's at 455 kilohertz. If you had super hearing, you could hear them vibrating. Where the ceramic, it does resonate, it does vibrate, but not as violently. Let's use the word violently. And that's the same with the Q of a coil. When the coil hits resonance, it's violent. The sine wave, if you got a scope across it, the sine wave goes way up in one spot. And then as you go past the frequency, it drops back down. And they design radios, and they try to give you the best they can. And some of these, like these Hellcrafters, they know how to trick you to buy the radio. They make it look better than another radio. It's basically the Ford Chevy thing. Ford cars always look better than Chevys. So you'd buy it, and it was a rust bucket. It really, the parts were harder to find secondhand, and with a Chevy, they made millions of them. They weren't that great looking. They made Camaros and stuff, but basically, the Ford models looked a little sharper, and they rode smoother. I had way back. I had the friends that had Fords. They rode smoother, and they were I won't say they were easier to work on, but radios are the same way. When you really get into it and you start collecting them and you understand. I had to go to school for how the circuit worked. They taught us radio and FM and transmitters. But in other words, that's the first introduction. Then you go reading on your own. And then you're sitting there one day and you're saying to yourself, how come I get the station on band B stronger than band A? And then you start getting into it. And I have a book, an old Radio Shack book. Maybe I should show it to you real quick. I know some of you get like really into some of this stuff. This is the stuff most people wouldn't bring home. You can see it's got writing on it. I loaned this out to a couple people, and I actually think I have my name on there. Well, anyway, I loaned this to somebody, and it's got these charts in the back. Let me see if I can find something real quick. They tell you you're not supposed to do this. Never keep the. I don't see it. It's not jumping out at me here. But in other words, they have charts, and you put your. I don't see it. Maybe weight's way in the back. You have a chart, and you lay a ruler over it, and you put the ruler on the coil inductance that you have, and then the capacitance, and you try to stay in the center. It's not jumping out of the book. You know, I should have looked this up. But in other words, if you go around on the internet, see, they got stuff like this, what frequency each TV channel is, and they actually show the waveform. I have reference books, and they do have the formulas in here if you want to get that into it. And they explain to you every time you add another winding on a coil. All right, it looks something like this. For you that held in there, you put your ruler across, and you try to get it to go straight across. And it has the inductance, the capacitance, and in other words, that's where you're going to get the biggest peak on the coil. And it helps when you're building a transmitter. It helps when you're building an RF amplifier. You want the coil to get excited, very excited at the frequency you want to pick up. And what it does is then it passes the frequency you want, more of it, so you'll be able to get the station when it's further away. But I just wanted to cover this real quick. I'm sorry I didn't have any big intro on my video. I noticed what I sit through on other people's videos, and some of the people are quite knowledgeable, but they have gaps. I have gaps in stuff. Like I can't really fix a television set. Oh, I can fix a television set, but not as fast as other people because they have more experience. I tend to stay away from television sets, old ones. They're always gooky, greasy inside. And I didn't like that, you know. But my fingernails are cut. I know some of you guys, oh, you did a long time. I'm very eccentric. I get really into stuff. That's why, you know, I got a couple people blocked. And I'll see that have a comment. And I go to it, and it's not there because the person's blocked. You know, people like to come in and they think I'm an easy target. And I did shut the comments down for a while. But what I do is I just block the person. And the person always has... They don't have videos on their channel. They have playlists that and they're always a young kid. They probably live at home with their parents, and they get upset that I say okay too many times. There's certain times when I'm doing a video, I'm trying to remember what I want to teach you, and you got to remember I'm 72 years old, and I talk very fast, and sometimes you'll notice I don't finish my sentence because my mind has already gone to another thought. I can't fix that. I just wanted to show you something like really, this is really different. When you really understand the fact that when you go from band A to band B, why it picks the station up better. It's not a bad connection. It's not a weak tube. It's the Q of the coils you switch to are higher at that frequency. Now in this case, this radio, this is a 4-section. So all three of these plates, or gangs, we'll call these gangs, these 3 gangs each have a coil on them. And when you tune the frequency, it tunes a 3-coil front end. This tunes the oscillator mixer. So, and here's the 2 tubes here, your RF amps. And here's the mixer sitting over here. This radio, it's a Hellcrafters. It's a steaming piece of shit, but it also does very well on the AM broadcast band as a DXer. Now, I also realized there's a national NC 183 that I missed. It's a dual conversion radio. That's probably the one I should have bought. I think that's it. All right, that's it.